Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you how to create stunning slow motion shots and fast motion shots with your smartphone using the free and fantastic Blackmagic Camera App. Let's get into it. Now, it used to be that to create slow motion in the Blackmagic Camera App, you'd have to film at 60 frames per second and play it back at 60 frames per second within the app. Then you take that to your editing software, like for me it would be DaVinci Resolve, and then conform it to slow motion there by playing back at a lower frame rate like 24, 25 or 30 frames per second. But now in the Blackmagic Camera App, you can actually conform that in the app so you don't have to do that in the editing, saving you a ton of time. Okay, so here's how you create slow motion within the Blackmagic Camera App. Now if you look on the top left, you've got your frames per second, which is currently at 25. If you tap on that, which highlights it, on the right hand side we have the dial that allows us to select our frames per second. Now we can go as low as 23.98, or we can go as high as 60 frames per second in 4K and in any resolution on the Blackmagic Camera App. It currently doesn't allow you to go to 120 or 240, at least in my experience. Now if we take this back down to 25, you'll see at the top of the dial we now have, with the latest update, O/S. This is off-speed recording. Now this is essentially going to be, when we press it, your capture frame rate. So if we press on OS at the top, that's now in blue, so that means we've got that selected. So if you look to the left, we've got 47 currently, which is our frame rate that we're going to capture in, and on the right we've got 25, which is what we'll be playing it back in, creating that slow motion. Now I'm going to bring this frame rate to 60, which, as we said before, is a standard slow motion frames per second. As you can see, it's capturing everything at a normal frame rate of 60 frames per second and still playing it at that at the moment. Now if you press record and I move my hand really quickly, you'll see some motion blur, and I'm using an ND filter to keep my shutter speed at double of my frames per second, creating that smooth motion blur. Now we'll press stop, play that back, and you'll see that it's now in slow motion and we got nice motion blur. It's important to note that when you're capturing slow motion and conforming it within an app like this, you won't capture sound, but there are two ways around this. You can either capture at a frame rate of 24, 25 or 30 frames per second, take that audio and add it in post-production to your slow motion clip, or like me, you can subscribe to a website like Artlist, I'll put a link in the description below, where you can find a relevant environment audio and then add it into post-production like I am on DaVinci Resolve here, and add it to your clip. Now this is how you capture slow motion, but how do you capture the smoothest? Now my big tip for capturing smooth slow motion is to use an ND filter. Now some people would say that's unnecessary because you're only capturing things in slow motion, but if something's moving fast, you still want to get that nice motion blur, that film-like motion blur. So do use an ND filter and do keep your shutter speed at a double number of your frames per second. So for example, I'm shooting at 60 frames per second. Despite the fact that my playback will be at 25 frames per second, I still want my shutter speed to be double my capture frame rate. So that means I'll have my 60 frames per second capture speed, and then I'll double that number into my shutter speed, give me a 1/120 shutter speed, give me smooth motion blur. So use an ND filter. Now what we're going to do to create fast motion is tap on the frames per second on the top left again. And now we have our OS at the top, we're going to select that. And instead of having our frames per second at 60 frames per second, which is obviously higher than 25, we're actually going to lower it lower than 25. So we're going to bring it down to, let's say, 12. And let's record and see what we get from that. So I'm going to move my hand as fast as I did before in slow motion, but now in fast motion. And you can see, whilst it blows out the highlights, so you need an even stronger ND filter for this situation, there's a lot of blur already there, and it's not as smooth, but if we play it back, we can see how much faster it looks. It looks absolutely crazy. So you can create really interesting shots, and it will fast forward your footage in a way that's not necessarily fast forward like you would do on a DVD or on Netflix, but it creates a really unusual look. So you can now create slow motion and fast motion within the Blackmagic app and have it conform there and then rather than doing it in post. If you've enjoyed this video, guys, then do check out my top tips video on how to get the most out of the Blackmagic Camera app right here, right now, or check out my full tutorial on the Blackmagic Camera app right here too. See you on the next one. Take care. Bye bye.